Roger, ready to move out.
Hey, and welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio, Chronicles of Rohn. I am your host, Alan J. Campbell, aka the Batman. Hey, you all, it is great to be back. We have been away for quite some time, and we're just getting things started. Hey, oh, and by the way, just in case if some of you don't remember, do you know, well, April of this year, we're now in June, but as of April of this year, this would have I would have been on the air 5 years. Yes, yeah. 5 years. And yeah, 5 years. And how time flies when you're having fun. Now, to jump right into a few things, I'm not gonna the social distancing and coronavirus, it kind of put a different spin on a lot of different things. Okay, and just so that we are clear, people, make no mistake, this virus is real. This is the real deal. This is some real shit out here. If you're not taking this seriously, please take this serious, because I know people personally who had it personally. And let me tell you something, it is no joke. If you have, and just another PSA, if you have not been tested, go get that done. I've had mine done. I came back, bam, ready to rock and roll. Mine came back negative. I'm glad of that. But if you haven't, or you feel that you need to, do so, please, by all means, because people, this is real. Also, if you have individuals who are of age, when I say of age, I'm referencing senior citizens, the elderly, they are susceptible to this, and trust and believe this is a true fact. But I'm not going to spit, but this is just a little bit of what we need to be consciously aware of, because we have because in fact, the way the studio is set up now, it is completely different. It's a completely different atmosphere, but at the same time, we have to be cognitive on what how we're interacting with everyone, how we do this. And then the other part, some of you individuals who are just absolutely dog nasty, filthy, wash your ass, wash your hands, just keep your house clean. There's no need for you to run out and completely clear the stores out of all the cleaning products, because some of you are not even using it anyway. What you're doing is you're buying it and you're bootleg selling it, thinking it's a come up. Don't be stupid. Anyway, let's get into the real deal, Holyfield thing here. I'm going to read off. I'm gonna read you something, and I want you to understand why I'm doing this. Right now, we are in a time that I kid you not, I myself never thought I would see. I won't say live to see, but to see. I have heard about riots in other countries, other states, other cities. I've heard of these things. I've seen it through media outlets. But to actually, and this was a different type of rioting. This doesn't even equate to the rioting when the Bulls won their first championship. Okay, we understand that people's levels of excitement. I get that. But the level of rioting that I saw and witnessed was the most unbelievable thing I could have ever seen. But I'm gonna pause there for a minute. But I'm gonna pause. This piece says, it's an article that I found, and it says, say their name. And actually, that is the title of tonight's show. Say their name. Say their names. It's a story of Black Americans killed by police, and these are the ones that we know of. That we know of. Let's start off with Sandra Bland. Sandra Bland died in police custody in Texas. You have Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed by a group of hillbillies. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this shit at all. This was a bunch of redneck hillbillies who jumped into a back of a pickup truck, chased the black man, chased him and gunned him down, and then had the nerve to record it. And I'm going to go through each and every one of them and give you a little bit of the backstory. Ahmaud Arbery, in the town of Brunswick, Georgia. We're all familiar. Michael Brown, fatally shot. The young man that was shot and killed in Ferguson by Darren Wilson. Terrence Crutcher, shot and killed by a female police officer who had his hands on his car, but this white police woman was afraid because this was a black man. Eric Gardner, what happened to him? I Can't Breathe has created that mantra. Eric Garner was killed in 2014 when white police officer Daniel Pantaleo put him in a chokehold, which was outlawed by the NYPD. Oscar Grant. A lot of you are not familiar who Oscar Grant is. Oscar Grant was the black man that was shot and killed by a BART transit officer in Oakland, California. If some of you are, if you're still a little fuzzy, there's a movie called Fruitvale Station. That's his story. Freddie Gray was the black man who died in police custody in the back of a police van. Botham Jean, which is most recently, who was shot and killed in his own apartment by a white police officer, a policewoman at that. You have Betty, and this one here, Betty Jones, right here in Chicago. That incident happened about 5 miles from our current studio location. This was a woman who opened the door so police could come in to see what the disturbance was, and another scared white cop opened fire, killing her and the other individual, which the police officer said that the individual coming down the stairs, Quintonio LeGrier, was coming at him with a bat. But upon that investigation, they see that the officer once again lied about the distance and the actual facts. You have then moving further down, Laquan McDonald. We all know about that. If you don't know about Laquan McDonald, you've been living under an effing rock for the last 6 or 7 years. Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old boy who was shot and killed in Cleveland by Cleveland police. Breonna Taylor. Now, two stories are very recent, and we cannot leave out this young man who where the fire should have been lit, but we had that asshole Obama and Eric Holder sitting in office who did nothing, didn't bring in the Justice Department to file civil rights charges against George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin. But going into Breonna Taylor's story, this was just recently. Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her own home in Louisville, Kentucky. This woman, she was an aspiring first responder. And people talked about her, how well, just how good a person she was, and the level of professionalism that she was doing as a first responder. She was a EMT, an EMT. And this woman was shot and killed in her own home by Louisville police, stating that they were executing what they call a no-knock warrant. Okay, and if I have time, I'll go into what that means. But giving you a little background on this story, Breonna Taylor, who would have turned 27 Friday, was at home with her boyfriend. This is in Louisville, Kentucky. Several officers showed up at her home with a warrant looking for another gentleman. And how they came up with this address is that it was alleged that she had been seen, check that the individual that they were looking for had packages going to her home, which they alleged that she was a drug courier. So these officers showed up with what they call a no-knock warrant. A no-knock warrant means that I can go, if I'm a police officer, I can go to a judge and give him the facts of what I believe is valid enough for him to sign a warrant. No-knock warrant means they do not have to knock on your door. Also means that they don't necessarily have to announce their office or announce that they are police officers. That poses a problem. It poses a very serious problem. In the ensuing situation, the police came in, smashed the door. The boyfriend who was there with her went on the assumption that someone was trying to break into their home. He grabbed his firearm, discharged it, striking an officer. Police officers returned fire from all sides from different vantage points of the home, which means that they were firing into an occupied home and not knowing who else was in there. Miss Taylor was hit, and I kid you not, reading the summary, the preliminary autopsy report, this woman was hit 8 times. 8 times. Needless to say that this went tragically bad because the person that they were looking for was not there and didn't live there. So what has happened now is that a judge has they're looking at this now on a federal level, and they're actually and Louisville has actually has suspended no-knock warrants indefinitely, which is something that should not even exist. A no-knock, and police will say, now this is not defending the police, but this is the logic. The element of surprise is crucial when you're trying to catch criminals. I get that. I totally understand that. But it would behoove me to say, let's make sure that who we're looking for is actually there. Did we follow them there? Did we see them actually enter the residence on the day of? Instead of going in and terrorizing people and then come to find out, oh, he's not here, but you've already tore up these people's homes. You've already done this. But she is just one of them. Now, going into the other portion, what I feel and believe that is perfect is that the situation with George Floyd in Minneapolis, the situation with that, we will all agree that had to been the most horrific thing that I think that any of us alive could witness. And the thing about it is that all of us saw this, and this was not seen in Minneapolis. This was not seen in just in Chicago or Kansas City, Dallas, New York, LA. This was seen all over the world. And people went apeshit about this. They were outraged, which they actually should. And just watching that video myself it's disturbing. It's disturbing. You've heard me many times discuss the communication between citizen and law enforcement. It's not that I'm for law enforcement. We have to have some form of law. There's even outcries to defund the police. And that's a little difficult to do. It's very difficult to do that. And not a lot of cities are actually going to do that because it's very, very difficult. But the situation with George Floyd has created such a firestorm, which is sometimes, unfortunately, George Floyd is now a martyr, but sometimes this is what's needed and necessary for people to fully understand what we as Black people have been going through, not for 10 years, not for decades, not for years, but for over the centuries, on how we have been treated and brutalized and subsequently murdered at the hands of white America. There was this goes into another story, and it just came to me, and I can't think of the woman's name and her son. In I believe it was 1923, and I believe this was in Louisiana or Tennessee. There was a black woman, and she lived in this town. She was not only that, but she had her 12-year-old son, and not only that, but she was 7 months pregnant. 7 months pregnant. I'm going to give you a story. I'm going to tell you this story so you can get a full understanding on the brutality we have continued to suffer at the hands of law enforcement. This woman was accused of stealing a piece of fruit. This woman was tracked down. This woman was caught, tracked down, and not only that, but they gathered around, and they got the members of the townfolk, men, women, and children gathered to watch this lynching of this pregnant black woman and her son. And what they did is that they took this woman and they hung her. They hung her, as pregnant as she was. And the most horrific part is not the fact that they also hung her 12-year-old son, but the woman went into labor and expelled the baby, and they snatched the baby away, snatched this fetus away from her as this woman was dying. This equates to what we're talking about, what happened with George Floyd. This is what happens and what it looks like. The officer, which we now have a face, we all have a name, Derek Chauvin, who was seen with his knee in this man's neck. Who does that? And not only that, but he was the senior officer. This guy had 19 years on the force. And you're doing this in front of rookie officers. Two of the officers had been promoted from had just finished their probation as rookies, and they'd only been actual full cops 4 days. 4 days. And this is what you get yourself roped into. Now, do we say it's a saving grace? One of the officers at some point appeared to have some form of compassion, and that the officer who and it was a question that now rings out. One of the officers stated to Chauvin as he was applying pressure to George Floyd's neck, "Hey, should we roll him on his side?" This is now when you watch the full video, George Floyd began to lose control of his bodily functions. This guy peed on himself as they continued to apply pressure. And one of the officers, Officer Lane, said, "Hey, should we roll him on his side?" Chauvin's response was, "No, he's fine where he is. Let him stay there." You are a FTO, field training officer. You are the senior officer, and you are teaching. So this kind of mentality, thinking, whatever kind of bird thinking this is, you're teaching these young impressionable guys who want to be police officers, who let's say for the sake of argument, who wanted to be good police officers, and you're teaching them bad habits. When I was an FTO and doing in different jobs, and I would say the one that would be most prominent when I was in towing, I was in road service, and I was the FTO. and I had my guys out there, new guys coming in, I would never let my guys see me do things, see them do what I do, or the way they would. I would never let them see how I would do this. I would show them the correct way, the proper way. Never. I take shortcuts because I know what I'm doing, and I've been at this a while, and it's just me. But I'm not going to take a guy who wants to learn how to do this, who wants to be good at his job. I'm not going to show him these shortcuts, because even in road service, certain things that if you don't do them correctly, you can get killed. You can get severely injured or killed. The same principle applies. Do I have any sympathy for these officers? No, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't, because no one exercised. They did not exercise good judgment. And the first and foremost, a policeman's the first thing that the policeman's creed is this: preserve life. That is the first thing you are told. That's police 101. Preserve life. It doesn't matter that George Floyd, that they're alleging that he had he had recently used methamphetamines and he had fentanyl in his system. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter. This man was a human being. He was someone's father. He was someone's son. He was someone's brother. He was a human being. And the fact that when you saw this picture, and just speaking from the anger that I saw that day, I could have choked this motherfucker. I could have choked him. The way that he had his knee in this man's neck, and not only that, but he was posturing with his hand in his pocket like he had captured some big game on the African safari. That is a picture that should stick with everybody that ever saw that. So imagine if those if there were not the all-seeing, non-blinking eye had not caught that. First and foremost, it's been points and times where there was no non-blink, that the all-seeing, non-blinking eye. There hasn't been one. Let's go back to 1970. Let's go back to 1980. Let's go back to the 1800s. Let's go back to points of slavery, to where white Europeans could kill you for just back talking. There's a law in Mississippi to where they actually can execute a black man for not obeying a white man. People, this is the part to where not so much as the country, but the world has woken up and saying enough is enough. We've had enough of this nonsense. The other thing, and I want people to think about this for a minute. This is the year is 2020. And when you go into and from an optometrist language, when they say that you have 20/20 vision, that means you have what? Perfect vision. That means that it's perfect. Nothing's wrong with it. It's ironic that this is 2020 and all of this is going on and the world has now seen it. So now, which means that the world has clarity. It is seeing things for what it really is. It is seeing clearly now. This is not by happenstance. I mean, by coincidence or happenstance. This particular thing was meant to happen at the right time, at the right place, for the right people. And right now, personally, this is a good time. This is a good time to be black, because ain't nobody gonna F with you right now. None. Zero. Nada. Point blank, period. But what we have to do though, people, is that we have to take a lot of this energy and we have to put it to work. we have to hold not only police officers accountable, but we have to start holding our elected officials accountable also, because a lot of this is a lot of what is going on is of their doing. We can't sit here. See, this is the thing where we can't sit here and talk about the man in the White House. He ain't got nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with this. Nothing. This is a situation that has to be dealt with right here now. And at some point, it's just simpler for him not to say anything and let this thing play out. Let it play out. Hey! Welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rohn. Who do I have on the phone and where you calling from?
This is Jay from Georgia.
Hey! What's happening, Georgia? Welcome back, Georgia. Welcome back. So you know what time it is. Time to sit back, strap it in, because you finna get your wigs blown back, everything. Go ahead, bro.
So let's start into the first part of it. There was one name that you did miss. It wasn't by, I know it wasn't intentional, which is another very interesting story. Atiana Jefferson, which was a young lady who was playing PlayStation with her nephew at a sleepover. And a police officer was called to her residence because it was about 2 a.m. and her door was still open. And a neighbor was doing a wellness call, per se. And that wellness call turned into an officer who crept back behind her garage, through her parking station, and fired through closed blinds at what he thought was her pointing a gun, which ended up being a controller. Mm-hmm. And she was shot and killed in her own home. Not even having been confronted by an officer. He shot through a window, striking her in her own home. He only gave her 1 second, and he said, "Don't move." And before anyone could respond, there was already 3 shots fired. But that's just one story that you forgot.
No. Actually, I didn't forget. Actually, I didn't forget, because I have her story here. I have a list of names I just didn't go through.
And that's the whole thing. It's the challenge is the list of names is, excuse my French, is so damn long.
Yes.
And I think what you were alluding to was one thing. And the first part of this is, before we get on this high horse of we ain't going to take it no more and we're going to tear everything down and we're going to do this, I definitely think that the time is now to do some definitive action. Absolutely. But before you go messing up everybody else's stuff, take a look at yourself. This is what I mean. Over the past 70 years, we have consistently put people in front of us, elected people in front of us, selected people in front of us who have absolutely betrayed us. And I've had this conversation before, who have betrayed us on every level of protection, standing, and validation of our existence. So we have to start there first. I don't want to hear about Trump. I don't want to hear about anybody else.
Right.
Until you can tell me what your representative has definitively done for your district, for your city, for your part of the country, that was a specific goal that was put before them to handle, that they handled. Mm-hmm. Start there. And I can only talk from where I am, but I know for a fact the ones we have here in Georgia have completely not held their part of the line. The only thing that they hold on to is the fact that they got beat over the head during the civil rights. And that's probably as much as they've done. Because in the state of Georgia, we do not have any sort of hate crime bill. Does not exist.
Right. In fact, Georgia and Mississippi do not have, which is two of the most racially charged states in the union, they do not have hate crime bills. Unbelievable.
They do not have hate crime. Now, here's an interesting part about the South, and this really goes to the fact of the failed vote or the failed trust that we put into our last president. Bobby Kennedy and John F. Kennedy were two brothers from Massachusetts who came to Washington as elected officials to deal with the turn of a nation, including those issues of civil rights. Correct?
Correct.
Am I not right?
No, you're correct.
John F. Kennedy was elected by a very large percentage of the African American vote, with the understanding that with that he would begin to look at how he can change legislation to help turn this country into a different direction for the outcome of Black people or Negroes. And I'm going to stick with the term Negro because that's a very important factor.
Mm-hmm.
But he chose to stick with that so that he could help Negroes get a better standing and more equality under his reign of office. And so to do that, what did he do but called his brother to be the Attorney General? Now, didn't matter who he called. The fact of the matter is, he knew that there were two elements that needed to be solidified if he was going to effectively put some legislation and some teeth into all of the other stuff that had failed previously. So, doing that, he said, I'm the president, so that's the executive branch. Now, I'm going to move over here and have my brother or put someone who I know and I can trust, who's going to put pressure into the agencies that are going to manage the enforcement of the legislation that we went through. That's the most important piece, because you can sign paper, you can sign an Amazon forest of trees until you have actual enforcement in place. It is nothing. And he knew that, which is why the moment that he found out, look here, if we don't get in front of this right now, and I'm talking about 62 and 63, when they were setting buses on fire and pulling people off buses and beating them over the head with clubs. And by the way, let's be very clear. There is a specific correlationship between white supremacy and law enforcement. And the
always
reason
has
why
been.
that
Always has
is
been.
Because in the South, you were obligated by civic duty as a white male of something called slave patrol.
Yes, right.
Okay? Right. See, so as a male, once you turn between 18 and 21, whether you own slaves or not, it was your civic duty within the South to help ride with those folks to make sure that there were no runaways or unaccounted for Negroes, which is where the term slave with papers comes from. Right. Or nigger with papers, whichever way you want to call it.
The proper term. No, the proper term. The proper term is, and my grandmother said the same thing. And she would say it jokingly. And if you're a child, you have no idea what the hell she's talking about. You in your mind, you're a child. You're thinking this is, it's funny as hell. You're like, wait, you better run like a nigga with you better have this on you like a nigga with slave papers. And you're like, what? Huh? What does that mean? But
and
now
so that was a real and legitimate thing. And had you been caught without them, it was a minimum 20 lashes. And it was $100 fine to the owner.
Right.
But outside of that, it was the fact that this was a mandate as a rite of passage. So it was a mandate and a rite of passage to white men to help police their communities in the South.
Well, and see now let me go into this right quick. Now it was asked, and it was a question that was presented to me just shortly before we went on the air and talking about how do I feel about defunding the police, and my response was, it's difficult to do that because that's federal. Those are federal dollars, federal and state dollars. And when you, and let's just use, I'm gonna use the city of Chicago's police funding. How much the police department gets for their annual budget. The city of Chicago has an annual budget of $11.6 billion. That's their budget. Of that 11.6 billion, that's billion with a B, 1.7 billion of that goes to police. Now we have to understand what that budget is. That budget is for payroll, overtime, equipment, technology, all of this. Now we will agree that there is a level of that the level right now, the level of policing is well, let me rephrase that. You're getting different municipalities that are starting to revamp, taking a hard look at their policing policies because of what they're actually seeing. You still got cops out here pushing people. They'll take they're called Buffalo 57. There were Buffalo 57. There were two upstate New York police officers who pushed Buffalo
Police Department.
Yeah, who pushed a 75-year-old man. The man fell and cracked his head open, was knocked unconscious. The two officers who were accused of that have been subsequently fired, and they were charged. See, what I was the other thing I'm allude to is when Jason when Jason Van Dyke, and Jason Van Dyke's conviction has all of these prosecutors now scrambling on the playbook. They're all vying for the same playbook. Hey, they convicted a cop for an on-duty shooting or an on-duty incident. How do we win this? Now, pause for a moment. We have, and then we look at the incident with the 4 officers in Minnesota. Now, a lot of people saying, well, he should have got first-degree murder. I say, no, let me explain to you how that works. You have to understand the letter of the law. If I'm a prosecutor and I have a police officer that is involved in wrongdoing, such as there's a crime where an individual loses his life or he dies at the hands of this police officer. It's not like this cop was fighting for his life and stabbed him with his pocket knife or shot him, or whatever. That's a different aspect. We have a situation where this was unjustifiable. Not so much as unjustifiable, but excessive force. Now, the case comes to my desk. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at all the factors that goes in. Do I want to charge him with first-degree murder? I'm looking at it. The biggest thing I'm looking for is premeditation and intent. Those elements must be present in order to reach first-degree murder. We don't know the mindset of these cops when they got up that morning and say, hey, we're going to go out here, we're going to kill us a nigger. I'm sure that wasn't their mindset. These were just 4 men. These were just 5 men that met at the wrong time in their lives. Now, when the prosecutor looks at this, I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, you know what? I want a conviction. I'm going to attach so many different things to where a conviction is evident, to where I'm charging him with third-degree murder, or now it's upgraded to second-degree murder. Along with that, and I told people this is how they're going to do this. I took bets on that. They're going to charge him with second-degree murder, and they're going to attach manslaughter. Because why? Because they looked at the Jason Van Dyke case and said, oh, because if you remember, Jason Van Dyke was charged with second-degree murder. They didn't attach manslaughter. Because they had attached manslaughter, Jason Van Dyke would have gotten more time than he would have for the murder, for the second degree. Because now with manslaughter, the proof are lower, because all you have to show with manslaughter is reckless conduct. And this officer, Derek Chauvin, displayed reckless conduct. And not only that, depraved, and not only that, but depraved difference to life of another human being. We have to, if we want to know how it works, we have to start reading and understanding the letter of the law, how it works. So
but with that also is when we send our elected officials to these places, it is their duty to make sure that things are done. Here's a prime example of exactly what I mean. There was an incident in the course of all of this social distancing in the pandemic where there was a Hasidic Jewish funeral in New York. I want to say it was Brooklyn, the borough of Brooklyn.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, in that borough, over a couple of hundred people came to give their condolences, grief, and to, as a community, which that's what they are, as a community, to grieve this particular person, whoever it was that had passed on, and so on and so forth. Now, this is why I'm making this specific point. There was one incident, where the police were called. The police were called to disperse the crowd.
Correct.
And to enforce social distancing and to all of those little health things that they kept telling us about, which is a whole nother thing. But nevertheless, in the course of that, 2 to 3 of those men were handled inappropriately. And what I mean by that is they were pushed, they were shoved. One of them was, he wasn't choked, but it was an illegal restraint hold that was used on him.
Right.
Nothing major. And by major is no one was forced to the ground. Everyone was just kind of ruffled, but no one was forced to the ground. No one was beaten, and no one was sustained injuries that caused them to go to the hospital or even die. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, before people's bruises went down, there was a call down to the mayor and to the police chief, and it was made very clear this is not acceptable, and do not, under any circumstance, let this happen again. That was made very clear. Now, the reason why that was made clear was because they have, as a community, a strong base economically, and they also have a strong base with ties to other communities that they can leverage, which means that when they have, or they're in a situation where they feel that their humanity or their dignity or their citizenship or their equality of their citizenship is anything less than first rate, you're going to hear about it, and we're going to make sure that that does not happen. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I just mentioned one incident in the midst of a pandemic where one segment of people were displaced or made to feel anything other than first class. One incident. And there was hell to pay, and New York has not crossed that line since. Not since. But at the top of your show, you went through, at best, 15 to 16 incidents where people have either been hurt or lost their life. See, so our problem is deeper than police and somebody putting their hands on us. Mm-hmm. Our problem is, the first situation is, there is no value of us as equal citizens, first thing. Our humanity is consistently denied because we're considered subpar or subhuman. See, and I think we need to get that into our psyche. I didn't say that you were, I said that you are considered that. So since you are considered as a second-class citizen with a subhumanity, or there's no reason to treat you like a human being, then what level of dignity do we need to afford you? See, that's how you can, in your mind, go to work and have every comfort of literally sitting on a man's neck, restraining a man till he pisses on himself.
Yeah.
And he's screaming out as a grown man for his mama. And let's not forget this now. You are watching people videotape you with their cell phone, and you have no regard that this would ever come back.
No regards. But see.
But my point is, the only reason you can do that is because you already know that you are operating within a veil of impunity.
Right.
And that veil of impunity has been endued to you because you know that no one advocates for these people.
Right. Now, with that being said, and I led into that, going back to, once again, our elected officials, and I tell you, if I was to ever get
let me just say this, and I because I got to get this in wise right now. The main reason why this flood has become clogged with blood and flesh is because of the failed administration and policy of Barack Obama and Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, who did a failing job. Eric Holder, believe it or not, lost 70% of the cases that he presented to the Supreme Court, including a voting rights law that he lost to the state of to the state of Alabama and Mississippi, which watered down the restrictions of voter rights and voter ID, which made it even more easier for the voter suppression, if you will.
Right. Now, I want to.
So when your attorney general can't win things in the Supreme Court,
right,
he's incompetent or he's weak.
No, it's not about being weak. It's a level of incompetence. This is an incompetent individual. This is a guy who I wouldn't.
Well, it's an administration because he represents a team of people.
But it doesn't matter whether it's the administration or one person. It's the fact that this is a person that you put out front. And you supposed to have vetted this person. It's no way. This is like a guy, a plumber coming to your house, and I'm sure we've all seen this commercial where it says, "Hey, how is this guy? Well, he's okay," and then you still hire him, and this guy and guy f's everything up. If you got a guy, any firm or organization, and that's the one thing that they're going to look at. They're going to look at your success rate, not conviction, success rate. And you have lost 70%. Why do we have this monkey, this idiot in the driver's seat to begin with?
Correct. And in addition to that, Eric Holder and the Obama administration failed to engage the Department of Justice.
Yes.
At any of those cases.
The biggest
one. The Department of Justice did not take the lead on any case under his administration.
The biggest one that they failed and they completely dropped the ball was Trayvon Martin. That should have been the lightning rod.
Well, that should have been a home run because the statue on that was more clearer than a police officer.
Exactly.
Here it is. You had an actual private citizen, and you were not even able to. Well, first of all, it wasn't that you weren't able. We have to be very clear. They did not pursue it at all.
Now, right?
What they said was they were going to do a parallel investigation to make sure that certain missteps were not taken. But that was basically saying we're going to make sure that the folks don't riot because they didn't get their due process. That's really what that equates to.
Now here's the flip on that. Here's the flip. Right after, and I mean right after Derek Chauvin was charged, that following week, the FBI, the DOJ immediately jumped on this. Wait, now let's go back. Let's now we talk about administrations. The current administration ordered the FBI and the DOJ get over there and find out what's happening. Oh, by the way, on your way to Minnesota, I need you to stop off in Louisville, Kentucky, and see what happened to that other young lady with these police. Oh, by the way, get some people down to Georgia too. So everybody out of the office and on a plane. This is what the current administration, the Trump administration, had ordered to be done. Because there's a point to where I'm hoping that we are finally turning the curve on not so much as justice, but social justice that we have been talking about. And the fact that now you're going to go, we are starting to see police officers charged. And just hold your thought. I'm going to, and now the names that I listed, I'm going to tell you about the officer involved and what happened, what they're doing and what happened with Michael Brown that was shot by Darren Wilson. A grand jury decided not to indict. Once again, Terrence Crutcher, the gentleman in Tulsa shot by a police officer, Betty Shelby. She was acquitted of manslaughter, which is not hard to believe. The police officer in New York that choked out Aaron Gardner, he was not charged, but he was ultimately fired. The 6 officers in the Freddie Gray incident in Baltimore, all 6 were acquitted, levels of incompetence by the state's attorney. Botham Jean, that was shot by Amy Geiger. She was sentenced to 10 years. Tatiana Jefferson, the officer that shot and killed her in Fort Worth, Aaron Dean, he's been charged with murder. Betty Jones, the police officer in the Betty Jones incident, Robert Rialmo. Rialmo was fired from his job. We go down to Laquan McDonald. Jason Van Dyke, as we know, is serving 7 years. Tamir Rice. This was the one that was really interesting. Tamir Rice was shot and killed by Timothy Loman in 2014. Once again, who was in charge? 2014. The Cleveland Police Department fired Loman in 2017 once it was revealed that he was deemed unfit from his previous police job. And Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Now the officers have all been reassigned administrative duties, and the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department has now suspended no-knock warrants indefinitely. Some places, the police chief and the federal and the judge both must sign off on this because they need to find the chain of command. The thing, and there's another thing that that particular FOPs or fraternal order of police are trying to do. They're trying to create a statute to where you cannot look at a police officer's previous. Actually, they want a moratorium to where you can only look back 5 years when a police officer leaves one job. They only want to allow you to look at it 5 years. He may have been on the job 15, so you're only going to allow me to see 15. And you're covering up something. Also, Derek Chauvin has had 20 disciplinary complaints in 19 years. That's a complaint a year. There are most cops who go 30, 35 years and not one complaint in their jacket. That tells you everything you need to know about this cop. And this is not so much just here, but it's widespread. And once we get to this point, because remember, this is worldwide. People have seen this and they're about fed up. This is why they're rioting all over the world. This is why they're rioting. And once you start rooting out these cops and you start not only charging them, but you're getting solid convictions. This will send a message to all the rank and file members of the law enforcement throughout this country that You are the law, but you're not above the law. We're going to treat you just like we treat an ordinary citizen. We're going to, and this thing of treating black people like they're prize, like they're branded beasts, I personally think it has finally come to a head, and now it's come to an end, that now the levels of accountability has to lay somewhere. And I applaud the current administration, the Trump administration, for getting involved, for making sure that the DOJ, that's the Department of Justice, the civil rights, that's the civil rights part of the Department of Justice, to get involved in saying, hey, we need to look at all of these, particularly Minnesota, to see, and they want to look at the entire system, top to bottom, of the Minnesota Police Department, to look at patterns and look and see if there's systemic racism, top to bottom, which we know they're going to find. The question is now, what do you do about it? Go ahead.
Correct. Part of that is when you.
Oh, did we lose you? Hello? Yeah. Okay. Something happened. Okay. But anyway.
Yeah. So when you look at Minnesota in particular, Minnesota was also in the news 3-4 years ago for the shooting of Philando Castile.
Correct.
A gentleman who had a concealed carry card. He was shot in front of his
girlfriend and child,
and in front of his stepdaughter, I think, or there was a minor in the car. But he was shot several times. And the attorney general at that time, her name eludes me right now, but she's actually a Democratic candidate, or was.
You're talking about Amy Klobuchar.
Amy Klobuchar.
She's another jackass who's going down in flames.
Used to press charges,
yes,
on this officer, and they failed to get an indictment. Fact of the matter is, and I will end it with this: before we run and we say this is Trump's fault or whatever the case is, we are in a very weird conundrum in the sense of we are responsible for this just as much as they are responsible for this at this point. We've been under systemic things for the last 275 years, absolutely. But at some point, there has to be a shift in accountability in the sense of how much do they hold, how much do we hold? For the systemic construct that we are consistently dealing with, that's their problem, which is 70%. It's a construct. See, we need to educate ourselves on racism. Racism is not me calling you nigger. Racism is a systemic problem. The words are the symptoms of the problem, but the real issue is it's a construct built on economics, resources, and who's controlling who gets what in those resources and the land and the opportunity. Mm-hmm. See, that's the real power of racism. Quit being so short-minded or so immature in your thinking that it's about the color of your skin. That's a symptom. See, and that's why they're so easily to control us, because you're not addressing the actual construct of it. The construct of it is you not being able to get access to things equally. You not being able to maximize all of the things and structures that you built. That's the true power of racism. But we gotta get to that point, because if we don't, this just becomes another opportunity that we're kicking the can down the road.
Yep.
That's what we've done. We've been to Washington before. See, that's why 2020 is going to be your last opportunity to fix this, because you've kicked it down the road so much that if you kick it again, it's going right over the cliff. And with that, any sort of hope of any sort of civility. And I think Minister Farrakhan said that 5-10 years ago. We are coming to a point where we can no longer not address this issue. We're kicking it down the road. See, and I say that there is a split between our community and the white society as a whole, because they do what we allow them to do. It's 70% of them, 30% of us. When we keep having people like Ben Crump, who's a failed attorney, people like Al Sharpton, who these people they live off of these race baiting circuses. Not one time has Al Sharpton given us because he's not capable of it. But see, these are the dead birds that they prop up in front of us to help pacify us, because they know at the end of the day, we got no economics. We've got no construct or no structure on how to even divert economics to hurt them. You ever want to hurt racism, you deal with it economically. The Montgomery bus boycott showed you that.
Yeah.
They didn't sit up and sing and march and we shall overcome. No, we are going to make their economy collapse. Here's the last interesting tip before I leave. MLK, before he was assassinated, April 3rd, gave a speech, and it wasn't, "I've been to the mountaintop." See, that's the part that they've sanitized so you don't look at what he was really telling you. Earlier in that speech, he told the people of Memphis and his delegation at large, there are vendors that we need to stop doing business with. Period. Look up the speech. It is an April 3rd speech, and most of it has been sanitized, but you got to keep looking through it. And he's talking about 10 vendors that he specifically said it's time to redistribute the pain. His first vendor on that list was Coca-Cola. The second vendor that he mentioned was Wonder Bread. And then there was another bakery company, Hearst Bread. Reason why those are important is it's really, really interesting that a lot of the urban things and the programs that we're seeing or that are co-sponsored today, who's a major sponsor at Essence Festival? Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
I'll leave you with that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Georgia. Thanks a lot. I mean, this is the thing to where, we're not going to stop doing what we're doing. When I'm not going to stop saying what I'm saying. If you don't like it, I'm not saying it for you to like, but I'm saying it for you to feed your brain, as we often say here at the station, which is often the tagline, feed your brain. That's the true nature of it. But when this is where we're at right now, people. We can, I could go on and on, in which probably in my next show, I'll go into how, breaking down the justice system and how these things work, the charges, how this works, what could they look, what are they looking at, what could they get? But first of all, we have to get there first. We could want all we want, but we got to get there first. And the only way we can get there, we get there together as a people. That's not this whatever this was. We were people running around and creating destruction and mayhem, and be mindful, people, when you are at these demonstrations and you seeing people doing mischief. Be cautious, because there's a network of people out there, or a group. It's called Antifa. These individuals are not about race change, social justice. This is a sleeper organization bent on destruction. Be mindful, be cautious, or as we say, be mindful, because there may be wolves among the sheep. There may be wolves amongst the sheep. Be mindful, people. But I see that, I see the lights flashing in the distance, and the helicopter is about to land on the pad. So which means that that's all the time that we got here tonight. Here on iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rohn. A shout out to my man, Captain Hooks. Hey, get your behind down there if you want some tasty food, chicken, shrimp, whatever. Get down there to 85th and Cottage Grove, 103rd and King Drive, and 159th and Kedzie in Markham. And in closing, not my monkey, not my circus. To the Batmobile.
When it's been, they gotta hit him, gotta get him like new shit. They call me Batman, cause the black mass is on my